Declan Shaw was a man adrift in a sea of routine. He had come to Seoul to teach literature, a noble profession by any measure. Yet the city's vibrant energy seemed to mock the predictability of his life. Each day was a familiar pattern of lectures, grading papers, and quiet evenings. He longed for a spark, for something unpredictable to disrupt the metronome of his existence. The thrill of academia had faded, replaced by a quiet, gnawing boredom. He found himself staring out of his university window, watching the bustling city below, feeling entirely separate from its exciting pulse. He craved a story of his own, one that wasn't found between the dusty covers of a classic novel. The idea arrived not like a lightning bolt, but more like a mischievous whisper. It came to him while idly watching a local sports broadcast about the upcoming Kimchee Cup, a prestigious horse race. The plan was wonderfully simple and utterly mad. He would find the slowest, most hopeless horse he could afford. He would purchase this creature and enter it into races. The horse, of course, would lose spectacularly, time and time again. Its reputation would plummet. The betting odds against it winning would soar to comical heights, perhaps 50-1 or even higher. It was a scheme built on the foundation of failure, a beautiful contradiction that appealed to his literary sensibilities. His chosen vessel for this grand deception was a mare named Lady Pasta. She was not a majestic beast born of champions. She was, to put it kindly, a plodder. Her race record was a testament to her distinct lack of speed. She ran with the enthusiasm of someone asked to do chores on a Sunday morning. But to Declan, she was perfect. He saw not a failing racehorse, but a golden ticket disguised in a bay coat. He would make her a running joke at the track. He would ensure she became the symbol of a lost cause. Then, when the moment was right and the payout was astronomical, Lady Pasta would do the one thing no one expected. She would win. The beauty of the plan was in its audacity. It was a direct challenge to the system, a playful poke in the eye of the racing establishment. Declan wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was simply a bored intellectual with a flair for the dramatic. The Kimchee Cup was the grand stage he had been searching for. The plan required patience, deception, and a healthy dose of luck. He would have to manage the horse, the jockey, and the ever-watchful eyes of the racing world. It was a gamble of epic proportions, not just for money, but for the very excitement he felt was missing from his carefully curated life in Seoul. The stage was set for a most unusual performance. A plan of such magnificent foolishness could not be executed alone. Declan needed a team, a small band of co-conspirators who shared his appetite for a little chaos. His first port of call was Jean-Michel, a fellow professor from the media department. Jean-Michel was a man who loved a wager more than he loved a well-argued thesis. The thrill of the bet, the dance with chance, was his true passion. When Declan laid out the scheme, Jean-Michel's eyes lit up with the fire of a seasoned gambler who had just been dealt a perfect hand. He saw the numbers, the odds, and the glorious, improbable payout. He was in without a moment's hesitation. Next to join the fold was Tanya, a philosophy professor whose life had recently hit a rough patch. She was navigating a difficult personal crisis, and the world felt gray and meaningless. The sheer absurdity of Declan's plan was a splash of vibrant color in her monochrome existence. It was a distraction, a project so far removed from her own troubles that it offered a strange kind of solace. She wasn't drawn by the money, but by the camaraderie and the preposterousness of it all. To her, rigging a horse race was a philosophical exercise in creating one's own meaning, a way to impose a wild new narrative onto a world that felt broken. The final piece of their puzzle was the jockey. They found her in Jang Mi-soo, a young, ambitious woman who dreamed of fame. Mi-soo was a talented rider, but she lacked the connections to land a spot on a winning horse. The offer to ride Lady Pasta was on the surface an insult. But Declan presented it as a performance. She wouldn't just be a jockey, she would be an actress. Her role was to make Lady Pasta look even slower than she already was, to hold her back just enough to lose convincingly. Then, in one glorious race, she would be the star who rode the underdog to a legendary victory. The promise of fame, of being part of a story everyone would talk about, was a lure she could not resist. And so, the fellowship was formed. This unlikely quartet of academics and a wannabe starlet began their secret operation. They pooled their resources, a motley collection of savings and small loans from other curious teachers who were drawn into the scheme's orbit. Their meetings were held in quiet cafes and late-night faculty offices filled with hushed whispers and bursts of nervous laughter. They studied racing forms, analyzed track conditions, and meticulously planned Lady Pasta's losing streak. A shared secret bound them together, creating a bubble of excitement in their otherwise ordinary lives. For the first time in a long time, they all felt truly alive. The first phase of the plan unfolded with textbook precision. Lady Pasta, with Jung Mi-soo in the saddle, became a fixture at the bottom of the results table. She would start strong, giving the faintest glimmer of hope to any uninformed spectator, only to fade dramatically in the final stretch. Mi-soo was a masterful performer, making it look as though she was urging the horse on with all her might, while subtly holding her back. The horse became a running gag among the regulars at the Seoul Racecourse Park. Betting against Lady Pasta was the safest bet in town. The odds against her ever winning began to climb, just as Declan had predicted, from a hopeful 30-1 to an astronomical 70-1. The group was electrified by their early success. The secrecy and shared goal created an intoxicating bond. They would gather after each race, dissecting Mi-soo's performance and celebrating another perfectly executed loss. The thrill was palpable, a secret current of energy running through their daily lives. A dull lecture on postmodernism would be secretly punctuated by a text from Jean-Michel about the latest odds. A quiet moment in the library for Tanya would be spent daydreaming about the final race. They were no longer just professors. They were puppeteers, pulling the strings of their own grand drama, and it felt magnificent. However, not everyone was amused by the consistent failure of the foreign-owned horse. Their little performance had started to attract the wrong kind of attention. A man named Li Wei, a powerful figure with deep connections to the racing syndicate and a reputation for taking things very seriously, began to notice. Li Wei was not a man who believed in coincidences. He saw patterns where others saw only luck. The predictable underperformance of Lady Pasta, owned by a group of amateurish foreigners, struck him as odd. It was too consistent, too perfect. He began to watch them, his gaze sharp and calculating from the exclusive boxes overlooking the track. The presence of Li Wei cast a long, cold shadow over their game. His quiet inquiries and lingering stares began to unnerve the group. The thrilling secret they shared now felt like a heavy weight. The risk was no longer just about losing their investment. It was about crossing a man who did not play by academic rules. The stakes had been raised considerably. What started as a clever scheme to cure boredom was morphing into something far more dangerous. The excitement was now laced with a very real and potent dose of fear, as they realized their little drama had attracted an audience they never wanted. As the date of the Kimchee Cup drew nearer, the pressure on the small syndicate intensified to an almost unbearable degree. The plan, which had once seemed like a brilliant, foolproof adventure, now revealed its countless flaws and dangers. Every whispered conversation felt like it could be overheard. Every glance from a stranger at the track felt like the stare of one of Li Wei's spies. The initial joy of the conspiracy had curdled into a constant, low-level anxiety. Tanya, who had joined for the distraction, found herself more stressed than ever before. Jean-Michel's love for the gamble was soured by the genuine fear of the consequences should they be caught. The scheme became a hungry beast, demanding more and more from them. They had to pour more money into Lady Pasta's upkeep, training and entry fees, all while maintaining the facade of being hapless amateurs. Their attempts to keep the plan secret became increasingly desperate and complex. They used coded messages and met in ever more obscure locations, their paranoia growing with each passing day. The web of lies they had spun around themselves was becoming a cage. They were trapped by their own creation, forced to see it through to its terrifying conclusion, as backing out now seemed just as risky as moving forward. The final act was approaching, but the thrill was gone, replaced by a grim determination. They were no longer a merry band of adventurers, but a collection of frayed nerves. The dream of a huge payout was now overshadowed by the nightmare of what Li Wei might do if he confirmed his suspicions. The simple, elegant plan had spiraled into a complicated mess, pulling their lives apart at the seams. Friendships became strained under the weight of the shared secret and the mounting fear. The wild ride they had so eagerly jumped on was now hurtling towards a cliff, and they had forgotten how to apply the brakes. In the end, their story serves as a stark reminder of a simple, timeless truth. The seductive allure of a shortcut, the promise of beating the system through cunning and deceit, often leads down a perilous path. Greed and secrecy are treacherous companions on any journey. They poison camaraderie and transform excitement into terror. Declan and his friends set out in search of a spark to illuminate their dull lives, but they ended up playing with a fire that threatened to consume them entirely. Their tale of Lady Pasta and the Kimchee Cup became a cautionary one, a clear lesson that the risks born from a dishonest game are often far greater than any potential reward.